On the flight deck, listeners are manning up for the podcast launch. It's time for all unnecessary shows to clear the airwaves.
You're listening to the Hangar Bay, a podcast dedicated to the latest military flight simulation and hardware news. From developers to the community and everything in between, the Hangar Bay will get you squared away.
Welcome down to the Hangar Bay, your source for the latest news that every military flight simulation pilot can use for the week of February 24th, 2024. I'm your host, Tumanji, and I'm happy you could join us for another episode of the Hangar Bay. I gotta tell you folks, it's a big week for news. We've got a lot of content, not only on the developer side, but especially in the community section this week. So I hope you're excited for a lot of good content, because we're here to bring it to you today. So let's get things started like we do each and every week with the flyby. The flyby is where we aim to cover the highlights from this week's news in 60 seconds or less. Kicking things off this week, we have Changelog overload. That's right, major updates for both IL-2 and DCS happened for the community this week. For IL-2, Battle of Normandy owners received the Spitfire Mark 9C, and a major control mapping update came to the game as well. For DCS, the big news was open beta and stable are dead. Long live the stable edition. That's right, no more two versions of the game going on at the same time. It's all happening in one place. So huge news for DCS. FlightSimForge Sim, a small hardware developer in the community, released an F-16 ICP on their Etsy store for $99 this week. Also on the hardware news, SimFab introduced new mounting hardware support for their recent run of rudder pedal and collective updates that have been happening between Virpil and Winwing. So if you're a SimFab hardware owner, be on the lookout for that. Back to the DCS side, the Persian Gulf map is being added to the DCS Enigma Cold War multiplayer server, along with the new intermission missions that are happening between each week-long campaign. Continuing on the DCS multiplayer front, we're also going to talk later today about a new server called The Coop, which is now live. Think of this as a spiritual successor to the popular Blue Flag server. Also, Fox 3 announced that they'll be hosting an Ultimate DCS Skills Showdown coming later in April, and honestly, there's a heck of a lot more, but that's all we got time for in this week's edition of the Flyby. Hope you'll stick around for the significant amount of news we will be covering throughout the show today. And let's get that started with the developer portion of the show.
Hey everyone, Wags here.
In the developer news segment, we bring you the latest happenings from game developers and related third parties. As mentioned in the Flyby, this section is going to be mainly focused on the significant amount of patch notes we've got to cover. Now, thankfully, we covered a lot in detail in the weeks leading up to today, but if you're a Flight Sim fan, it was a great week of new content for you. So let's start on the World War II side of the house with IL-2. The 5.202 update went live on Tuesday, February 20th. Now, as mentioned, we covered a lot of that in detail, but some of the major highlights, as I mentioned earlier, are the Spitfire Mark 9C being added for free for Battle of Normandy owners. The IAR 80 and 81 is officially released due to the addition of the, quote, long version of that aircraft. So if you do purchase that collector's edition of the aircraft, you essentially get two aircraft, the short 80A model and now the newly added long 80B model. Other changes brought in this update are the improved flight model for several planes, including the P-47, the Focke-Wulf 190A, and the P-40. And finally, what I think is the biggest change for fans of the IL-2 series is the improved control mapping process. All of what we have in DCS. We went into more detail on this last week, but the short end of it is essentially now, if you're looking to map a new control, you can either search for that assigned command by pressing the button, or search for it by typing in the name in the control mapping scheme process. It makes finding what you want to bind much, much easier. And this also includes the addition of several new on-off commands, as well as the game for aircraft controls like brakes, engines, bomb bay doors, prop feathering, things like that. This patch also brought with it some additions on the World War I side of the house, specifically the addition of the Advanced Quick Mission Generator on the Western Front map for the Flying Circus owners. And then finally, swinging back to the World War II side, the addition of the Airfield Defense Mission type is now available for all IL-2 World War II campaigns. So lots of great content in this week's update if you're looking to get back into IL-2 or if you're already an existing fan. Sticking with the IL-2 news, I forgot to mention this in the earlier developer diary from the beginning of the month, But since I didn't talk about it, I wanted to bring it forward to today. The Wings Over Caen campaign is in development from the IL-2 developers. So you can check this one under old news, but good news. So this will be a free campaign that will be released in the near future for Battle of Normandy owners. So if you're a Battle of Normandy owner, you're getting a lot of nice little content updates lately. This campaign specifically, though, is going to focus on the RAF number 245 squadron flying the Typhoon. So this is going to be based on real operational records of the 245th Squadron, as well as other squadrons belonging to the 121st Wing. But essentially, you can think of this as a anti-ground campaign. There'll be 4 main tasks for you in this campaign: suppression of anti-aircraft, anti-tank, and other artillery batteries, destruction of enemy transport and armored vehicles, airstrikes against enemy strong points, and then a variety of free hunt missions where you can go seek out enemy road and railway traffic right behind the front lines and attack it at will. All of these missions are going to have different weather conditions, time of day, battlefield smoke, along with other difficulties you might encounter, such as enemy ground fire and maybe the rare enemy fighter. But that said, this will be a free campaign. Look for it maybe in the coming weeks. No specific timeline was given, but at the rate they've been turning around the previous patch, hopefully it won't be long before we see this as well. All right, so let's shift over to the modern side of the house and talk about DCS. So DCS had quite a week for content news. The patch 2.93.51704, you feel like you go to 15 numbers with these DCS patches sometimes. But needless to say, this is the first significant update we've had for the game in 2024. Actually, I think it might be the first update period. But setting that aside, as I mentioned in the flyby, the biggest update for the game this week is the unified version of the game. So no more stable, no more open beta, no more having to track which version your friends are on or which version new players are on. Everyone will be on the single version of the game. That's the only one that's going to be updated moving forward. So as a result of those changes, when you go to update this week, you can expect a pretty hefty download. Now, granted, I own a variety of maps and modules, but I think I was looking at 160 gigs. So yeah, took quite a while to download that. Some of the other major highlights beyond just the unification of the versioning of DCS are the addition of a new campaign, the DCS F-15C Aggressors campaign by Maple Flag. For those of you who haven't purchased an Aggressor Air Combat campaign by Maple Flag, essentially what you're getting here is an increasing series of difficulty matches where you're going 1v1, 1v2, 2v2 against enemy AI fighters. This particular campaign is going to put you in the seat of the F-15C at Nellis Air Base, where you're essentially recreating the role of an aggressor squadron. You're going to fly for the Red Forces against Blue Air Forces. There'll be 11 total missions, and there's quite a amount of content here. He highlights over 1,800 voiceovers and 49 pages of briefing materials. So if you've previously tried one of their combat campaigns and enjoyed it, or are looking for something new to do with the F-15C, this might be of interest to you. You'll need to own the NTTR map, F-15C, or Flaming Cliffs 3, and this campaign will cost you $9.99. On the Flaming Cliffs 3 note, one of the surprise updates in this week's DCS patch was the addition of, previously unannounced, I believe, improvement to cockpit and external textures for most FC3 aircraft. So a nice little free upgrade, if you will, for the Flaming Cliffs 3 owners of several of the textures for those aircrafts. I want to give a shout out to Tuvis, that's Tuuvas, who put together a fantastic before and after comparison video on YouTube, highlighting for you exactly what some of these texture updates look like. Looks like, in my eyes, the most significant updates happen to the A-10A, whereas most of the other aircraft just receive a series of touch-ups. But have a look for yourself. I've linked the video in the show notes, and as always, if I haven't mentioned already up to this point, you can find the show notes on thehangarbaypod.com. So move over to here, episode 5, and you'll scroll down and you can find exactly what I'm referring to in the notes. Also, feel free to follow along on the video version of this show, which you can find on the YouTube page at Stu Manji, or on Spotify, where I also host the video version of this show. And I'll go through the show notes as I'm talking about them. So anyway, getting back to the DCS patch notes, mentioned the Flaming Cliffs 3 upgrade there. Some of the other content we had this week was the previously discussed last week F-18C flight model improvements. Again, this will be particularly noticeable at low speed and high AOA. angle of attack for the F-18C. Beyond that, we're talking dozens of game-wide bug fixes, hundreds of aircraft and campaign-specific fixes. Far too many to go through, so I linked the whole changelog in the show notes, and I really strongly encourage you to go check out for yourself exactly what changed this week. Go find the particular aircraft you're interested in and learn more about it. I did pull out a couple other highlights, so I want to share with you. One for the A10C2 owners out there. There's going to be a new single-player mission called Serpent's Head. You can go check that out if you are a A10 owner. For F-15E owners, so the RASBAM F-15E Strike Eagle, there were some updates to the radar as well as the addition of an MGRS programming and a new gun mode functionality. Speaking of guns, the SA-342 Gazelle owners will get an upgrade to the minigun variant. It received an update and now features the first iteration of Polychop's Gunner AI. So that's kind of an interesting little addition there. Also, they made a note that said the input system has now received an overhaul. So if you fly this aircraft, be sure to check your bindings for the Gazelle, as some of those inputs might have changed from what you were expecting. And then finally, the updates that I wanted to add on for DCS were some previously mentioned content from last week. But again, in case you missed that, there are some new airfields. So they added 2 new airfields to the Normandy 2.0 map, High Halden and Dunkirk. And then Syria received not just one, I thought it was just one airbase update, but received 4 airbase updates. Or, excuse me, make that 5. 5 airbase updates for the Syria map. And we'll touch a little bit more on that later about one airport in particular. But if you like to fly the Syria map, go check those air bases out. It's Amman, King Abdullah, Prince Hassan, Muwafaq Salti, and then Herzliya. So, tons of great content for both IL-2 and DCS this week. Go chew on those patch notes. I know it's an always exciting time whenever we see new updates come to the game. So, in case I missed what you're interested in, refer to those changelog updates and dig in. Finally, on the developer side, we have just a little interesting tidbit, nothing major from Grinnelli Designs. They are developing the F-100 module for DCS, but they released something earlier this week, which I just thought was kind of fun and want to share with you, the community. They put together a little video that gives a behind-the-scenes perspective of the work that a development team building a module for DCS has to kind of go through. So essentially what this is a video time-lapse of all of their code updates. So essentially the progression of the code base from May 2022 to February 2024. So I got a link to the YouTube page in the show notes. Go check it out. It's just really wild to see the module come alive, if you will, in this top-down code time-lapse. But really, really cool. Gives you some insights in just how much work goes into developing a module for DCS, and you can start to understand why these things take a while, especially in light of relatively small development teams. So that concludes things for the developer news. Let's shift things over to the hardware news side of the house.
Flight controls. Flight controls.
If you can move it, toggle it, push it, or rotate it, hardware news is where we're going to talk about it. And kicking things off for hardware news, we have FlightSimForge Sim, which is a independent independent hardware manufacturer, mainly operating out of an Etsy store. They debuted their F-16 ICP for $95 with free U.S. shipping on their Etsy store. I apologize. I think I might have said $99 in the flyby, but $95. What you're looking at here is a custom aluminum enclosure with laser engraved acrylic paneling and 31 buttons and 4 potentiometers in total. So a nice little recreation of the full F-16 ICP. If you like to fly BMS, you like to fly the F-16 and DCS, this might be exactly what you're looking for as an addition to the cockpit. It is backlit and it comes with a stand, but there's no mounting option beyond kind of a do-it-yourself Velcro approach. And it comes with the USB-A connector, which is built into the controller. It's about 3 feet long. And again, that's $95 US with free shipping. Also on their Etsy store, if you're flying the A10, they do have a UFC as well for that aircraft. So for DCS A10 owners, that one is $85. So I always like to highlight new hardware manufacturers in the community who are putting new products together that the community can enjoy. So if you're interested in either one of those, I encourage you to go check out FlightSimForge Sim on Etsy. That's FlightSimForgeSim.etsy.com. Now shifting things over to a little bit more of an established, larger developer in the hardware community, that's SimFab. If if you're not aware of SimFab, they're similar to Next Level Racing, and they design more of the all-inclusive kind of cockpit hardware for you. So think chairs, mounting brackets for your throttles, rudder pedals, joysticks, things of that nature, kind of a one-stop shop for all of your major cockpit needs. I actually own the SimFab chair. It's a fantastic piece of hardware. So if you're in the market for something beyond just specific aircraft-related controllers like offered by FlightSimForge Sim, and you're looking for more of a holistic cockpit solution, SimFab might be a company that could be appealing to you. Specifically, their news update this week regards the mounting pattern updates. So, mentioned the flyby that we've had a lot of new rudder and collective updates from both Virpil and Winwing, respectively. Well, for existing customers, say you already ordered your cockpit, but you have your rudder pedal plate already installed, but you wanted to get the new Winwing rudder pedal plates, and oops, those don't align properly. The mounting holes don't fit the new Winwing pedals. They've got options for you. Same thing with Virpil Collective base owners. If you bought the new counterweight, you're looking to install it, it doesn't fit with your existing mounting plate, they got you covered as well. So what they're going to do is offer 2 different service options for existing customers. So you can either download a do-it-yourself template plate, so it's a PDF drawing, put it over your existing plate, drill the holes yourself, done. Otherwise, there's a professional drilling option. You can leave all that work to SimFab. So they're giving you an option on simfab.com/services where you can purchase a prepaid turnaround where all you do is pay for the shipping. So you pay for the shipping. You'll ship them the plate you want. They'll provide the drilling service complimentary and ship it back to you. So essentially, you ship them the plate, they drill it, send it back to you, done. Otherwise, for new customers, going forward, they do have a new collective plate that is compatible with the Virpil Collective counterbase or counterweight. That's $25 USD, and they have a new rudder pedal plate, which now includes the mounting holes for the Winwing rudder pedals. That's $50, and that should be compatible with all other major rudder pedals out there, be it Thrustmaster. Oh gosh, I'm gonna totally brain dump the other major rudder pedal manufacturers, but you go to the website, check it out if you're looking for full compatibility. Generally speaking, if it's a major hardware player in the scene, or even one of the minor ones, but it's popular in the simulation community, they're going to have it covered. So, not a lot in hardware news, but those might be of use to you. Hopefully you learned something new there. So, let's transition to the portion of the show where we highlight the work of people just like you, the community.
Really not track it, what they're doing exactly.
So starting with community news, this is where we cover the latest goings on of the community, from campaigns and mods to servers, software, and everything in between. Enigma of Enigma Cold War server is going to get us kicked off this week with some announced changes to the popular DCS Cold War server, Enigma Cold War. So as mentioned in the flyby, the campaign is going to receive an update in the form of a new campaign. So in a video released earlier this week on his YouTube page, they announced that when the F4 is released by Heatblower for DCS, they will add a 3rd campaign to their rotation. So the Persian Gulf map will be added to the rotation to go along with the Syria and Caucasus campaigns that are currently in rotation. Enigma said the goal is to have a campaign where each aircraft has its time to shine. As such, the campaigns are going to be structured as follows. The Caucasus is going to exist as the 1960s scenario on this server. And if I haven't mentioned it previously on another episode, or you're just not as familiar with the Enigma Cold War server, this is a PvP server, so you're going to have the blue forces and the red forces competing against one another. It's a great time. I really enjoy the server if you can hop on there. It's generally pretty busy, but if you can find an open spot, you're looking for some PvP multiplayer action, this might be a perfect fit for you. But getting back to the content specifically regarding the campaigns, Caucasus, going to be a 1960s scenario. So think no precision guided munitions, iron bombs, unguided rockets, early air-to-air missiles. The focus of this campaign is on those early aircraft. So think F-86 Sabre, MiG-15, the A4 mod, the MiG-19. Syria is going to be the 1970s scenario, and this is going to represent their bread and butter campaign. So there'll be an introduction of AIM-9P type missiles, older precision guided missiles, early Fox 1 tech, so think R3R, AIM-7E. The focus of this campaign is the F4, the F5, the Viggen, the MiG-21, F1 Mirage, the A-10A, Su-25. When the F4E is released by Heatblower, that's when the Persian Gulf scenario is going to start, and that is going to be the 1980s scenario. So we'll have 60s, 70s, and 80s. The Persian Gulf map is going to introduce semi to all aspect missiles, so Slightly longer flight times too. The map will be a little bit more spread out, which benefits, or I should say is very fitting for the Persian Gulf map in that sense. And that's to represent slightly more capable aircraft. And then the more capable aircraft will also be available in this scenario, albeit in limited quantity. The overall focus on an aircraft perspective is generally going to be the same as Syria, but as I mentioned, more capable aircraft will be introduced. So we will see the F-14 on this map. We will see the MiG-29 on this map, again in limited quantities. Enigma did go on to say that the MiG-23 will also be added to this map when it's released, hopefully later this year, by Razban. Also in this update was the concept of intermissions. So Enigma said the goal is to have each one of these campaigns generally run for about 7 days for a full week. So when the campaign ends, intermissions are going to be introduced as a fun palate cleanser, if you will. So between each campaign, you'll have an intermission which will run from anywhere from 4 to 24 hours. The first 2 intermissions that are going to be introduced are PVO, which is the one that has been previously played on the Cold War server. This will be where blue escorts B-52s while red defends against those B-52 bomber strikes. This will be a 24-hour long intermission. So think F-14s versus MiG-21s and Mirage F-1s. There'll be some limited MiG-29 and Su-27s as well. The other intermission, and the one I'm really interested in, is the Lebanon War 1982. So this will be where blue aircraft must strike Syrian and Lebanese air bases. So blue is striking the air bases, red is defending against those attacks. Blue is going to be F-16s, F-4s, A-4s. Red's going to be MiG-19s, MiG-21s, and some limited Mirage F-1s. Just sounds like a nice, unique mission type. Get in there once a week, check it out before you go into the meat and potatoes, which are the main campaigns Enigma's running. Finally, on a map front, Enigma did say they are looking to introduce an intermission based on the Sinai map. Now, there's no current plans to fully support this map in the form of a full campaign, and that's mainly because Enigma has concerns over the fragmenting the community. And, I think that's a valid concern that probably deserves a larger conversation at some point in time about what a quote-unquote paywall looks like in the community, making players buy maps rather than allowing servers to buy maps, but we'll save that for another day. At least in terms of Enigma's campaign, again, Sinai will be introduced for an intermission. They'll see how that plays out, how popular is it, how often do people participate in that map, and we'll go from there to see if that will have any follow-on effect to introduction of future maps into intermissions. But if as for right now, the 3 maps going forward for campaigns will be Caucasus, Syria, and Persian Gulf. Sticking with Enigma, he also released a really great interview with the developer of the Coop, a new hardcore PvP server that just came online recently for the DCS multiplayer community. The developer of this map is, I believe, Kipper was his name. So this is a great 30-minute long interview that Enigma does. I love when he puts together these interviews on for community members to spotlight great things the community is doing, a la what we're trying to do here in community news. Shout out to you, Enigma, giving you a virtual fist bump there. But this particular server, what we learned about it through the course of this interview is essentially what this is looking to do is to pick up where Blue Flag left off. So if you ever flew on the Blue Flag multiplayer server, think like a co-op PvP type server where Blue Force is competing against Red Force. And the developer here essentially wanted to recognize that Blue Flag had stopped being developed for a while, wanted to kind of update it, introduce some new functionality, and basically reinvigorate that campaign and push it forward. So what they're looking to do here is create an environment for people who are comfortable doing things that have consequences. So this is not just a jump in, grab a plane, suicide, rinse, repeat. No, there's consequences for your action. Aircraft will be limited. Inventories will be limited in terms of logistical weaponry. Logistics affect weaponry that's available, affect fuel that's available. So all of your actions on the server are going to affect your team as a whole. So it's really encouraging a community of like-minded people to get together, play this campaign realistically, rather than being a airquake type server. So if you're interested in that kind of environment, it looks like it could be a really compelling option. They put a tremendous amount of work into this server. I think the developer mentioned they've put over 50,000 lines of code in it. But essentially what you're looking at is a modern quote-unquote 1980s server using the Caucasus map. There's 3 types of objectives. You got air bases, forward operating bases, and logistic hubs. So in that sense, it maybe is similar to other DCS multiplayer servers. But What they're really leaning into here is a couple interesting features. One, they're making heavy use of the warehouse systems to introduce logistical concepts that really have a foundational impact on the gameplay itself. In many cases, logistics is heavily rewarded. So they're encouraging helicopter aircraft to be flown by users. For example, if you put down a SAM site or a man pad and that unit makes a kill, you get the points, and that counts just as much as if you were in an air-to-air dogfight and made a kill. There's going to be the introduction of an advanced JTAC system. So the menu will allow you to interact with the JTAC, change the laser codes, select what targets you want the JTAC to provide you targeting information on. You can even implement a nearby a system where nearby artillery can be directed by the JTAC. So imagine you are a helicopter, you fly in artillery, then you fly in a JTAC. You can actually contact the JTAC and tell it to provide targeting coordinates for that artillery. Boom, call in an airstrike. And they actually demonstrate it in this interview that's on Enigma's YouTube page, which I've linked in the show notes. Check it out. It's a really cool feature. I think that could be a lot of fun. And then finally, one of the most compelling options for me is the introduction of combined arms functionality. So you don't just have to fly on the server. In general, every unit and every deployed unit is controllable with combined arms. So if you're someone who wants to experiment in a little bit of different gameplay, but still be in a large multiplayer environment, this could be a really compelling way to interact with this community. Overall, the one final note is the server is going to be open source, so the developers releasing this to the community. So hopefully we'll see some other servers that want to leverage some of the great work that's been done here and move it forward in their own campaigns, and the community can grow and have wonderful other servers that build off of this. I've got a link to the full campaign documentation here if you're interested, so go give that a look. Continuing on with community news, as I mentioned at the top, we have a lot of great community news, so hopefully finding some of this interesting this week. Fox 3 is Managed Solutions. If you're not aware of Fox 3 Managed Solutions, they own and operate DCS servers. So if you're looking for a top-of-the-line DCS server, but you don't want to host it on your own machine, Fox 3 takes care of all of that for you. So they sponsor a lot of other YouTube members of the DCS or military flight simulation community. You've probably seen their logo around a lot of places. Seem like they got a really great setup over there. But what they announced this week, which I thought was interesting to share with all of you, was an Ultimate DCS Skills Showdown. So they said they're putting this together. So it's going to go down from April 19th to April 21st. They're going to host 3 days of aerial challenges for the DCS community. The first of those is going to be the Bomb Run Brilliance. Can you deliver ordnance on target while navigating a maelstrom of stress? Show us your mastery in weaponizing dumb bombs like a true ace. The other note they had was Caucasus Mountain Rally. So it looks like it's going to be a race through the mountains of the Caucasus against time. So maybe a time trial, see who can get it done the fastest. And then finally, which the one I think is most intriguing, is Landing Legends. It says it's the ultimate test of grace under pressure. Will your landing showcase the precision of an Air Force pilot or the audacity of a Navy aviator? So I imagine we'll learn a little bit more about that in the weeks to come. But those are going to be the 3 main competitions. It says there'll be prizes galore, so champions can look forward to prizes including DCS modules, state-of-the-art flight controls, and exclusive Fox 3 merchandise. But they go on to say that this is more than a competition. It's a celebration of skill, dedication, and a shared passion for aviation. But B, it's because you're flying for a cause. So I kind of buried the lead on this, but the main reason Fox 3 is doing this is to support an organization called Canines for Warriors. I hadn't actually heard of this organization before, but it sounds like a fantastic group who's doing some tremendous work. Essentially, their goal is to end veteran suicide. So if you didn't know, they point out that roughly 20 veterans end their lives each and every day in the United States. Canine Warriors is an organization that provides highly trained service dogs to military veterans suffering from PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and military trauma. The best part about this is that the majority of dogs are also rescues. So in some way, shape, or form, you have a rescue helping to rescue someone else. It sounds like a fantastic organization. What a wonderful cause to be behind this competition. So needless to say, I'll be looking to spotlight this event more in the weeks to come, but I just want to give you the initial update on it. If you're looking to learn a little bit more about this competition, You can find out more at fox3ms.com. And K9s for Warriors is K9sforwarriors.org. That's K9sforwarriors.org. All right, shifting away from DCS, we've had a lot of great DCS news, but let's not forget about some of the other flight sims out there in the military flight sim community. Let's go to BMS. So for those Falcon 4.0 fans, Aviation Plus put together a great F-15C tutorial for BMS. That's right. You don't have to just fly the F-16 in BMS. You can also fly the F-15C, which is now, I guess I'll call it, quote unquote, an official module for that flight sim. So if you're not aware of Aviation Plus, what a fantastic resource for all military flight simulation content, but mainly BMS, DCS. I mean, he's my go-to for everything BMS, especially when it comes to tutorials. He's a member of the 6th Virtual Fighter Wing, so I'll give them a quick shout out as well. They fly BMS, DCS, and then run ARMA 3. They're at 6thvfw.co. But what Aviation Plus brought to us this week on his YouTube page was a hefty video. I'm talking 3 hours of knowledge here for you people. But if you want to crawl, walk, run, and learn this new aircraft in BMS, the F-15C, this is the video for you. It's going to walk you through everything you'll need to do a pre-flight, aka get your bindings set up, get your controls set up, to understand the aircraft systems of the F-15C, to how to do a cold start, how to work your way around the cockpit, to get up and running, take off, not flying, navigating. He even walks you through a few missions. I mean, it's a perfect setup for anyone looking to get into the F-15C and BMS. I can't wait to give the full tutorial a follow through, as it's an aircraft I've been looking to get back into as I do more with BMS moving forward. So give it a shout. That's Aviation Plus on YouTube. I have the link in the show notes for those of you who are interested. Staying on the BMS side of the house, I also found a great YouTube video from someone called Jet Pilot on YouTube. He has a wonderful tutorial, walks you through an amazing plugin for the F-16C for voice attack. So this plugin works for both DCS and BMS when you're flying the F-16C. One highlight I had for it is I've been wanting to mention voice attack on the show. I hadn't found a great segue yet, but Jet Pilot provides it here. For those of you who aren't familiar, voice attack, as the name kind of implies, is a software that enables voice-activated control for all your PC games and apps. So it's at voiceattack.com. It's a wonderful piece of software, but the plugin that Jet Pilot here is highlighting is the Jan, J-A-N, DCS BMF F-16 plugin for voice attack. I mean, when you want to talk about comprehensive, that's what this is. It's got over 50,000 voice commands. So if you can think of it, you can likely do it in this aircraft. So if you want to have a voice command that tells you the distance to the nearest runway, or a voice command that will set up your ILS and radio frequencies, or heck, a voice command that'll walk you through a complex configuration like your full fence in or out checks, your refueling setup, you name it, this plugin's got it covered. So I got the link to the forum post on the Voice Attack website here, as well as to Jan's video. And then I also have a link to a video of the coolest piece of this plugin, which is the precise pop-up attack feature. So this is based on BMS's weapon delivery planner, if you're familiar with that. Essentially, it's a little GUI that pops up in game, and you can plan every aspect of your pop-in attack, like waypoints, target information, whatever you want, and you can save it and either, boom, hit the little button that'll send it to your aircraft, and you can watch your ICP be plugged operator right before your eyes, or what's really cool is you can define all of these attack parameters, save it, and then just activate it via voice command, via voice attack, and boom, watch all this information get plugged into your DED right in front of you. What a fantastic piece of software. Check it out. It really simplifies a lot of the voice attack process because it's already done it for you. So, and a lot of other voice attack plugins or profiles already exist, especially if you fly DCS, go to the DCS user files. Generally speaking, if there's an aircraft you like to operate, someone's made a voice attack profile for it. And that's probably something we should feature on the show. Bailey, I believe his name is a great developer for these profiles on the user file page, among other DCS add-ons. But it's a very powerful piece of software. I encourage you to check it out. Then the final piece of community news this week is from Notso. N-O-T-S-O. So if you haven't heard of Notso, he's a former F-15E Strike Eagle Wizzo. he put together a great video over on YouTube about how to use the MGRS, so the Military Grid Reference System. I mentioned earlier that had been introduced into the F-15E in the DCS patch notes this week. Well, if you're not familiar with the Grid Reference System, or you are, but just want to know how to use it in the F-15E, well, he's got you covered. So he also offers some additional tips at the end of the video where he talks about some real-world lessons learned about how to make typing in information from a JTAC faster and easier, which I thought was really helpful. Having worked with the JTAC myself in the previous life when I used to fly in the Navy, it's a skill that you have to just practice over time. He's going to give you a few tips that make it easier for you. So, and also to mention, given Natso's background as a former F-15 Wizzo, he's a fantastic resource for all things DCS F-15E related. So even if you're not interested in this particular tutorial, go to check out his YouTube page. It's a wealth of content. So that wraps things up for the community news. So let's shift it over to the user content of the week.
They just blew themselves up. They just blew themselves up.
Sometimes it's a mission, sometimes it's a tutorial, sometimes it's just an interesting topic of conversation here in the content of the week. And this week, it's Skyward Flight Media sharing a Syrian Caen co-op multiplayer mission. That's right, we're going heavy on the DCS multiplayer this week. So if you're single player, well, I'll try to get you more content in the weeks to come, or maybe potentially use this as a little gateway to push yourself into something you haven't done before, which is DCS multiplayer. Personally, I think that's where the game really shines, and probably in many ways BMS as well. But with DCS this week, Skyward Flight Media shared a really cool mission, which is Caen. So it's based on low-intensity conflict. This is aimed primarily at light attack, trainer aircraft, and helicopters. So they're taking center stage here. The overall mission structure is designed around defending a coalition outpost from being run by insurgent forces on the Syrian map. So that's where this is focused. So mission types include striking ammunition depots and missile sites to lower the enemy's fighting capability. You could also be hunting down elusive mortar teams. It's a semi-dynamic mission, so you never really know where the next man-pad or anti-aircraft gun is going to come from. And it's best played in groups of 3 or more people. So the assets are in place to allow combined arms. So if you own combined arms, you could act as a JTAC for your friends. But to me, the most compelling option here is most traditional multiplayer missions are geared around the jets, operating over large areas, larger distances. This is a relatively compact area, allowing some of the slower, smaller aircraft to operate. As a helo bubba myself, I think this sounds fantastic. I can't wait to give it a shot. Maybe do it in combination with the OV-10 Bronco mod. That's one of the aircraft they feature in the video, which I have linked in the show notes for you, as well as a map of what the mission type looks like. You can find this mission on skywardfm.com, and it's the Syria Caen co-op mission. So that's from Skyward Flight Media. Thanks to the crew over there for putting this together. But one final content of the week, I couldn't let you get away with just one, given all the news we had. Just having a single content of the week seemed a little lame. So we got 2 pieces of missions for you. I mentioned I didn't have much for you on the single player side. I lied. Sim Sedlow here to the rescue. So Sedlow, if you haven't heard of him, is a wonderful mission content developer for DCS. He has a wonderful YouTube page where he walks you through a lot of how to use the mission editor, a lot of his development processes, some of the things he's doing to make his campaigns. But he also makes great missions that you can fly in DCS as well. And the best part is all of them are for free. Well, in combination with the update for the Syria map, he went ahead and updated all of his Operation Inherent Resolve, so OIR missions, on the DCS user file page. Got a link to a cool video where he actually showcases using the Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. That's where he always kind of envisioned these missions being based out of, and now with the addition of that air base to the map, well, now you can fly off of that on Syria. So Sedlow's a machine and has designed this mission for not only the F-15E Strike Eagle, which he features in his videos, but also the AV-8B, the A-10C, the F-16C, the F-18. So if you own any of those aircrafts, you can fly his missions. They are all available in cold start or air start versions, and again, they require the Syria map. But as a special bonus for the F-15E Strike Eagle owners out there, you can also play this single player mission as a multiplayer mission. And I've done that with my friends before, some of the guys I like to fly with. It's a great time. You can find the link to these missions on his user files, as well as all the other missions that Sedlo's put together. He's got 2 red flag missions for the F-15E, and amazingly, he has the 13 mission campaign for the F-18C. That's right, a free 13 mission campaign on the Persian Gulf map called Bold Cheetah. So he's got you covered on the Syria map with Operation Inherent Resolve. He's got you on the NTTR with some red flag missions, and on Persian Gulf with Bold Cheetah. That's Sedlo. You can follow him on Twitter at SimSedlo. Links to all this in the show notes. Sedlo, thank you so much for your contributions to the community. But wait, one final update from Sedlo. I mentioned his YouTube page is a great source of information, so I want to give him a shout out too, and link to that in the show notes. He's got a really cool mission editor update. So if you're someone who likes to play around with the mission editor, understand new tips and tricks about how to make your own great missions or multiplayer missions, he put together a really cool feature this week highlighting some additions to the mission editor that came in this week's patch, specifically the addition of a pop-out text box when you're editing scripts and messages, and then he also does a nice walkthrough of a very cool feature involving link trigger zones. So if you're a mission editor guru, go check it out. Now finally, let's shift things over to the Simpit Spotlight.
You don't see any big stream of flames or smoke coming out, do you?
So it's time for my favorite segment of the show, where we highlight a community member's personal Simpit setup, no matter how simple or complex, to celebrate the joy of flying from home. And this week, we got to give a shout out to Chelly777. That's Cheli 777 on Reddit at the Home Cockpits subreddit this week. He has an F-16, F-18 racing home cockpit. So 2 weeks in a row, we're kind of showcasing a cockpit that can be used for flying or home racing if you're a driving fan. Now, it's taken Chelly here over 4 years to arrive at where they are today. The design goals they put together, which part of the reason I love this post was how they talked through their design goals. You could kind of understand how this grew to what they have today. They wanted something that was easy to get into without needing a lot of setup. They wanted it to be easy to switch from racing to flying. They focused on Track IR or pancake mode, so this is not a VR cockpit. It's involving a 2D monitor. And they want to be able to roll it in and out. So essentially what they did was create 2 different mobile cockpits, one for flight sim and one for racing. So I guess they kind of cheated, if you want to think of it that way, because it's 2 different cockpits, but the functionality of it is really cool when it all comes together in terms of what their layout looks like. So I want to highlight it. Plus, one of the coolest features, if you check out the video version of the show or go hop in the show notes, again at thehangarbaypod.com, is the addition of tracking points. So they covered their cockpit with these little white dots all over the place so they can use it for 3D scanning, which I thought was an incredible addition. Essentially, they can 3D scan the whole cockpit at home, so these white dots are all over their gear, and they can bring this whole setup into CAD software whenever they want to design new parts. I'd never seen that before. Really cool feature, so shout out to that, Chili. Most of the core hardware itself is from Winwing, so they got the F-16, F-18 parts. The general frame itself is from Next Level Racing. The monitor is the nice Samsung G9 Ultra Wide. And then everything else is a combination of 2x4s and 3D printed stuff. So just goes to show you, even if you buy some top-of-the-line hardware, it's amazing we can just get done with some 2x4s or your imagination in terms of 3D printing. So I've got some nice screenshots here of what the flight version of this looks like. Really cool setup, and then a picture of the racing setup as well, and links to the Reddit post where you can find almost all the components linked by Chelly himself. So shout out to you, Chelly. What a great setup. If you could think of a setup that you'd like to see featured here, or you have any ideas in general, send it to me via listener feedback.
612, departure radio check.
Listener feedback, where you can get in touch with the show, is via Instagram at the Hangar Bay Pod, or on Twitter at the Hangar Bay Pod. You're always welcome to follow me there. I'll broadcast content that we're looking to talk about during the week leading up to the show. Also post the links to the show each and every week. As I mentioned, you can also find the show on YouTube at Stu Manji, where you can also follow other podcast-related stuff where I put together videos and helpful tutorials on things you can utilize to improve your flight simulation setup. Finally, you can find the show on Facebook as well. If you're looking to contact the show beyond social media, you can also email the show, feedback@thehangarbaypod.com, And finally, you can leave a voice message for the show on Spotify. I always love to hear from you about any news or content you'd like me to feature. If you want to be featured on the Simpit Spotlight or you know someone who should, please give me a shout out. I'm always looking to highlight great things that the community is doing. That said, that concludes another episode of the Hangar Bay. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. We'll be back next Saturday, as we always do here, to get you squared away with all the latest military flight simulation and hardware news. But until then, think about what you put out into the community and make it a better place. Fly safe, everyone.
Roger that. Let's go down low on the decks. Unload 500 knots. Let's get out of here.
The missile knows where it is at all times. Oh, I'm sorry. What I meant to say is that you can find the video show on YouTube or on Spotify at the Hangar Bay Pod. The audio show is available on all major podcast providers. You can contact the show via email, feedback@thehangarbaypod.com, or on Instagram and Twitter at the Hangar Bay Pod. Show notes and links to everything discussed on this week's show are available at thehangarbaypod.com.